Hey traders, welcome to Charts and Coffee. Great to see everyone. Happy Wednesday. This is not like a typical Wednesday. The ECB, the European Central Bank, is having what could only be considered, hang on, I'll show you right now, what could only be considered to be central bankers palooza. So if you've never been to the Forex Factory website before, I would highly recommend checking it out. And it could show you all these international hot zones in the time zone that you're in, which is really helpful. A lot of websites will do that. So once you log in, you can create a username and password. I've been using this site for a very long time. And just create a username and password. And then that way it locks into the things that you want to keep an eye on. And then when you pull up the calendar, as you can see here, everything is shown to me based on East Coast time. All right. With that being said, scroll on down to Wednesday here, and you'll see starting at 9:30, ECB President Lagarde kicks it off. Then Bank of England Governor Bailey, then Bank of Japan Governor, right on and on and on to the Fed chair. And then I guess Lagarde has parting gifts and party favors. I don't know. But this is going to be affecting our morning. So heads up, it's the ECB forum that's going on this morning. So lots of Fed speakers. And by the way, as if Powell is not going to be busy enough, tomorrow, there he is again. So he's on a world tour. Powell's got it good. Today, he's hanging out in, where is he? Sintra. Tomorrow, he's going to be in Madrid. It's a good gig. All right. So let's get to it. We'll kick it off with some questions. We'll take a look at what's going on with the broader averages. A pretty big surge yesterday through the session, and we're hanging out just below yesterday's close. That is, of course, the line in the sand. The previous session close, as I know a lot of you know this already. I've taught this for many years. With the past, 3-4 years of day trading classes we've done. One of the easiest places to get sentiment. There's two really easy places to get sentiment. One, more broadly, is where was the previous session close? That's settlement date. Because that settlement gives us an idea of whether someone's looking at the previous session saying, am I up or down from that, right? They're credited with the close as far as a loss or a gain. If they're carrying the position overnight. The other thing is a little bit more unique to what I do, which is the multi-trend at the bottom of the chart. And this thing is measuring 4 exponential moving averages and the relationship to each other. So if you're ever at a loss for what kind of mood is the market in, just go right to the cash close. What was the 4 p.m. East Coast cash close? Boom, as I call it, the line in the sand. And then if you have things like the multi-trend, that's going to give you even a little bit more information about just the general mood. And by the way, we've got, yes, we're below the line in the sand, but we've got an overall uptrend. Tough not to be a buyer of the dip. All right. Okay. So let's kick it off with our first question of the morning. By the way, I am on the trading view charts. I'm going to try to use these a little bit more often in our show. The toss charts are fine too, but these are fantastic. So these are the trading view charts. All right, Robert asks, SMH, sure, and Disney on the 1 hour both look like buyable dips at this point. Where would I set a level to get in on either? All right, so let's do this. I'm going to open up the 1 hour. We're going to take a look at both the 1 hour and the daily. The daily is in an uptrend. I'd rather be in an uptrend. Robert, I'll be looking for a couple things. We have a number of volume ledges in play. This is not a trend on the 1 hour. So I would not call this a 1 hour buy the dip. It is a daily time frame buy the dip. You might say, Rog, what's the difference? The time horizon is different. The structure, the support, the resistance is different. So I would say on the 1 hour, it's still very much likely going to be a daily price movement range buy on that. On Disney, Disney's in a downtrend. And the 1 hour is in neutral. So there is no buy the dip for me on Disney, right? So notice again, I'm going right to the underlying structure of that time frame, right? And the daily is in a red multi-trend. The 1 hour is in a yellow neutral. I don't have a setup to the long side here, but what I'd look for is an oversold stochastic coupled with the daily price movement range. And that's where I could buy the dip on Disney. So SMH would be a daily time frame setup, and Disney would actually be a 1 hour setup based on the structure of those individual time frames for those symbols. All right, next up, John asks, how would we set up a trade on NVIDIA based on the pre-market today, based on a 2 minute? John, I mean, straight up, I don't do that. I'm happy to show you what my tools are showing, but that is not something that I do. So I want to be really clear about that. But yeah, I'm your Huckleberry. We can take a look. So let's first let's go ahead and pull up. And you want NVIDIA? Sure. So I don't trade pre-market in stocks. If I'm going to trade pre-market, it's going to be a liquid market, futures, Forex, right? So that's number one. If I want to ready myself, here we go. If I want to ready myself for the open, right? And I'm looking at a 2 minute, actually, I would not look at the structure of the 2 minutes. So what I'd start with, as you can see here, is the 5 minute, right? What's the structure on the 5? It's quite steadily neutral. Okay. Now that I've got the reading on the 5, I can go back to the 2 and say to myself, all right, where would be support be? I'd like to see an oversold stochastic, maybe a V-score signal. And at that point, if we can sink down into the hourly price movement range, as soon as the bell rings in 23, 24 minutes, that's a long way away, right? So I'm not going to trade pre-market, but I'll have to make an assessment, John, closer to the bell, right? So what I would say there, and just looking at a couple of other things, is, John, I would say I would look closer to, say, 925. I'd look to see where those zones are. I'd look to see what the structure is. And then I'll just use the hourly price movement ranges. All right, next up is, good morning, good morning. Make sure I change this back to a 5. There we go. All right, we got the 3 candle pattern on ES. Is it time to take a buy? All right, Andres, so I imagine you're talking about the minor high or low pattern. So minor low would set it up, right? Minor low would set it up. The minor low actually triggered yesterday, and it triggered from far lower. So if you're trying to look at a minor low, really, really simple. The low candle is this one right here, right? That means that candle's high is the breakout. So revisiting that area around roughly, let's see, what I don't have to actually give it to you, roughly 4403. Revisiting 4403 would be a revisit to that minor low breakout level, right? So we actually did that yesterday, right? So as we broke above 4403, that was the buy. Revisiting 4403 is not really still a minor low confirmation, because a minor low or a minor high is really a momentum type entry. All right. So that already triggered, that's already followed through, arguably, because we went from 4403 all the way up to 4424 and 3/4. That was the trade yesterday. I would look for probably something else today, because it isn't time to take a long today. It was actually yesterday. All right, Andres. All right, moving on to NG. Hey there, Steve. All right, taking a look at Natty Gas. And there we go. Let's kind of take a look at what we've got. So NG went double green on the daily. Oh, did it? Hang on. Yeah, it just went double green on the daily. So with that in mind, what would we do? Well, 2 ways we can look at this. There is a, right here, that zone of support at the volume ledge. That's buyable. That's buyable. That zone of the volume ledge actually is perfectly encapsulated by the range we saw on June 22. So if you look at June 22, high low, 2.632 to 2.529. That's a pretty good, that actually shows us the volume ledge very nicely. So we'd have to move back down to that level, or I'm going to be looking for the daily price movement range. I'm not sure that this fresh green structure would hold if we were to move down to either one of those. Such is the way of a very vulnerable fresh transition to a trend. But yes, I mean, we've been bullish for a bit for no other reason than, frankly, we went into a neutral environment really in mid-April. And then at that point, it makes sense to look at different Darvis levels. It makes sense to just prefer the long side and buy near support. So this transition to a green trend would just open up yet another possibility of being more aggressive about what type of retracement, what type of pullback we could buy. So yeah, I would not buy it here. No, we don't buy higher highs. At least I don't, right? I would not buy it here. No, I would wait for that pullback. Yes. All right. If there's anything anyone knows about my style, if you've been here at Charts and Coffee for even a minute, right? What we want to remember is that we don't want to buy higher highs unless it's a narrow sideways range that breaks out, right? You know, when the market is pinched and then it breaks out, that's a completely different thing. And then once we have a trend, we want to buy support. When we have a sideways chop, we want to buy support, which means we're always waiting for weakness to buy into layers of where we would expect buying demand to be, which is really all that support is. It's buying demand. All right, got organic coffee on lock. Nice. Josh, I'm with you. Do a little espresso here this morning. Got a little honey in here. Drop some ketones in it. Yep, I'm with you. Picked up BA calls on Monday. Okay. And all right. Actually, interestingly enough, those BA calls, that's a minor low. News hit last night regarding the end of the strike, whether up or down. I plan to hold the stock, but curious what my take is. Yeah, near term, and I'm just going to get rid of the least of the the DPMRs here just for a moment, just to clean it up just a bit. There we go. All right. So right here, your lower low on Friday, June 23, was your minor low. That means Monday, the day you bought the calls, beautiful. As we traded higher through 205.61, there's the confirmation of your minor low. And then now you're getting some very nice follow through. So congratulations. As far as what I would look for, look, be vigilant about paying yourself. I don't know what your time horizon is. You plan to hold the stock. Yeah, if you plan to hold the stock, I would also want confirmation that the weekly is pretty well supported as well. Yeah, and the weekly is trying to go into an uptrend. I don't know that, I'll tell you, the thing that I would say that would be a precursor to me saying there's a hold, I'd really like to see price action. So if you're asking yourself, well, maybe you're not, this is what I would ask myself. Until we get above 214.5, roughly 214.5, maybe even, actually, no, 212.5, I believe is where that's sitting. I'll tell you for sure. 212.17. Until we get above 212.17, you've got the weekly 2-year point of control overhead. We can take that level out. Maybe that's the daily time frame minor low that helps catapult price through that level. At that point, that would for me give you a really, really good look at buying support, and therefore also a really, really good look at that continuation. Think of it this way: if anything's going to jump, it needs a floor, right? And so I think about what are the price floors, whether that's price, really volume, volatility. What are those floors, right? What is a floor? Floor is buyer. Buyers create what? Demand, yeah? And demand creates the movement going higher. So everything starts with a place from which the buyers can stand, quite literally. And so I always ask myself, where are those levels? And then I can determine if there's decent follow through. So thanks for the question. All right. Can we take a look at QQQ? Of course. So QQQ would still very much be an NQ futures conversation, whether it's QQQ, NQ mini, MNQ, micro, whatever it may be. I want to be long for the most part. The only thing I will tell you, Shiny, is that I have some concern, and we don't look, gang, sector rotation doesn't have to happen. And it doesn't have to happen at the end of the quarter. It's just more likely to happen. So a lot of times we think everything's all about rotation. It's not. Rotation is about profit taking in the strongest sectors and then that capital going into the underperforming sectors, right? That's why we call it rotation. But there are times when all the sectors participate to some degree. There are times when cash is going to come off the sidelines and won't necessarily come out of tech. It just might go into energy, staples, utilities, right? That's not rotation. So there's a lot of words out there that get way too much play, and rotation is one of them. Although, I mean, obviously, as we're heading into the end of the quarter this Friday, it makes sense to consider that possibility. That said, QQQ could be vulnerable to that possibility, which is sector rotation out of XLK, XLC, XLY, and then possibly, and I wrote about this in, by the way, if you want to know a little bit more about this topic, check out yesterday's free video. I walked through how I outlined the candidates for sector rotation in the current issue of this week in the market. So you can check that out. But yeah, I would say just be careful of that. If not, I'm a fan of buy the dip, Shiny. All right. Mark asked, do I only use TradingView for my analysis? Yes. And use something else for execution? Yes, I use TradingView for analysis. Not that it can't hook up to many, many other, as you can see here, brokerages, but you can't trade options through TradingView. And I do a lot of options, day trading and swing trading. You can trade futures through TradingView. You can trade Forex through TradingView. You can trade crypto through TradingView. I've done all three. But when it comes to options, not so much. So yes, if I'm going to go something else for execution, whether that be Toss, Tasty, I'm using Tradier right now. Yes, I have to go to another platform, which I really don't mind. I do not optimize for speed in my trading. I do not. I optimize for timing, which is very different than speed. But thanks for the question, Mark. All right, Stephen asked, how do I know when to trade if there is economic decisions and which ones? How do I know when to trade if there is? Well, Stephen, depending on the economic event that's happening, we're going to have a certain amount of volatility, right? So when I see central bankers on the calendar, what's going to happen is oftentimes we'll push past, right? We'll push past the typical historical volatility. So I want to be aware of that. I don't trade any economic decision. I'm always looking to capitalize on the volatility that's created, which is very different than being pre-positioned. For example, I don't believe in trading earnings, right? I like to trade the ramp up, the rally oftentimes into earnings, but the event itself, I'm not looking to make some binary play on whether there's a miss or a beat on earnings. I'd rather pick up two dice and throw it down the felt table, which is exactly what trading high volatility events are. I won't do it, right? But after earnings or after a high impact event, sometimes as the dust settles, we'll find opportunity. All right. Next up is UNH. All right. So let's jump on over there. Harold, yeah, I don't know where to even start with your question. I don't mean to skip it, but can you say some tips about your indicators? Harold, I would check out the free videos over at Simpler Trading. I also have a website, I have a URL for YouTube as well. You can go to my YouTube channel at Raghee Horner. So yeah, start there. Okay. So I don't want you to think I'm skipping over, but there's no possible way I could begin to narrow that down in a 20-minute show. I hope you understand. All right. UNH. It's bouncing, not quite enough, but it is bouncing. Let's take a look at the daily time frame. You'll see the gap. When I say not quite enough, I'm looking for the gap close. I'm looking for it to be a tie ball game once again in UNH. I'm looking for this thing to basically come back to the scene of the crime, if you will. And that's 491.31. That's where I'd want to be sitting at, right? And at that point, the next question is, can we get above the 200, right? At that point, can we get above the 200? All right. So as always, gang, thank you so much for your questions. Get them in early. I'll get the time to get to them. I will be frank. If you're typing your question in about 18, 19 minutes past the hour, I'll only be playing catch up at that point. But I appreciate you being here. Thank you for the time and questions. Caffeinate and dominate, gang. And I'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same station.